Hi there and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a watercolor orchid tutorial. This is a commission that I recently finished and I figured I would film it and walk you guys through it if you wanted to learn. So first I'm going to just roughly sketch out my orchid. Here I am using a still life, so I have an orchid plant and I'm sort of just sketching it out and going along with it, making little tweaks and changes, but I generally just use a pencil, and then after I'm going to take away a lot of the pencil by using a kneaded eraser, but this is a great guideline for you to use if you don't want to just go right into the painting without any sort of direction. So typically I will do this for a commission. If I'm doing something a little more free, I won't usually do this part. So you can do this or you can skip it. But here I am just tweaking up how I would like everything to look. The leaves will fall over the pot like this. They're big and beautiful. And I love these luscious leaves on the orchids. And I'm just kind of tweaking, changing things around. Here I am going back in with my kneaded eraser, erasing some lines, but mostly just blotting down and picking up some of the pigment. Now I am mixing up a very light, almost dirty mixture. So this is going to be used as a white. So in watercolor, sometimes it's hard to create a white without actually using white. So the pot is white. So I'm using this sort of a dirty mixture, and it's a little mix of violet, indigo, and very diluted down just to create the illusion of a white pot. And then as this dries, I will add in some more shadows. So I'm just going to speed that up for you so you don't have to watch the entire process. Dropping in a shadow with the same dirty mixture, just a little less diluted, and sort of blotting it out just to create a soft shadow. Now I'm mixing up a green, brown, reddish hue for the stems because it's not just green, it has some brown and then it bleeds into the green buds. So I'm just going to go in with a very skinny brush. I will link all of what I use in this tutorial. I will link it below. So I'm going in with a little round, a 2 round, and I am drawing in the stem first. And I'm just using that brown mixture for the stems. And then I'm going to use like more of a true green chartreuse like for the buds. And what will happen is that brown will bleed into the buds if you do it quick enough. So I'm just going to go around and sketch in my entire painting with the greens and the browns. So here's a little bit of a close-up. I'm going in with that brown shade, marking where the stems are. And then as the stems go up, they sort of bleed into green. So now I'm adding green at the tips of the stems and then green at the buds. And I'm going to just repeat this process. I was doing it a little bit slower so you could see here how I add the green to the tip and have it bleed into the brown. Just create the buds. And just keep doing that until you're happy with it. Now you can go back in once it dries and add a little bit more of that brown bleed where the bud and the stem meet. This is good when you have a reference. You could really see all these different hues coming together. I'm going to mix up some more green. I'm going to do those leaves. So these leaves are pretty large, so you have a big surface to work on. So I'm just going to roughly sketch it in, and then as I finish, like as it dries, I will go in and add some more details. But here I'm just following the lines. I'm filling in the lines like a coloring book. Using a little bit of a larger brush to fill these big leaves in. I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm going to change the greens. I'm going to vary hues. So there I did a light one and now I'm doing a darker one. And this just adds more interest to your painting. Because if you did it all one color, it would be kind of boring and flat. So ever so slightly changing the tone, lifting when I can. And now I've mixed up this very light purple with a lot of water, and I'm just going to fill in my orchid leaves. And this is just going to act as a surface, and we're going to build layers upon this. So a lot of people do forget to sort of add layers to their paintings. So this is a nice way to create a base. And in the center of the orchid, there is a little bit of a touch of yellow, so I'm just laying down that ground first. And I'm just going to do this to all of the orchids. And then we're going to go back in and create some more details. So laying down that very light purple mix. And then adding that yellow right to that wet mixture, and letting it bleed out a little. And as that dries, I'm going to go in and just color in the roots. So I'm using that brownish green for the roots. It kind of matches the stems, but it is a little bit lighter. And I'm going to also finish up on shading, adding shadows to my pot. So I'm using that. It's like a light Payne's gray, very diluted mixture with a lot of water. And I'm just adding shades to the pot. So now it's going to give it a little bit more dimension and make it look a little bit more realistic. There's a little bit of a shadow under where the leaf hits. So I'm going to add the lip of the pot in there again and create that contrast where the bottom of the pot meets the table. And this is just going to really just make it look a lot more realistic. So it's not flat. And I'm working with it, bleeding out, blending, using wet on wet at this point technique. Now I'm going to go back into the orchid and add some colors. So here I am mixing up the perfect color that I want, adding in some violet, some magenta. I'm using that very skinny brush again, and I'm creating lines. And right now I am working on a dry surface as the paint has dried over the petals. So this is not going to create. And now I'm just doing a stippling technique and creating little dots where I see them on the flower. They're all different. Not one of them looks exactly the same. So I'm just kind of going with it. I'm not really worrying about perfection because there's just no way that I would copy each and every flower perfectly. And I'm using that same brush to sort of map out the center of the orchid. And yeah, I'm just going to go along the flower and find where everything's supposed to go. So you can't really see that pencil too much now that we have the paint on it. So I'm just using that as a guideline, dropping in more pigment where needed. So the center of the orchid is a little bit more darker. And I'm just mapping out the shape of the center. I'm just filling that in. Loading up my brush again. And the center is a little intricate, and they're definitely very unique flowers. Very beautiful. There's this little like lip here that folds up, and it has like two little points on it. So I'm trying to mimic that. But also I'm not doing this extremely detailed. I do like my paintings to be a little loose, not extremely realistic, but this painting, this commission is a bit more on the realistic side. So that is why we are working in layers. Now I'm using a darker purple, like a violet bluish mix, to create more lines that I see on the petals. I'm really just using my reference and copying what I see. And now I'm using this technique where I'm going to wet the paper and use a sort of wet on wet, so I could drop in some pigment and create more bleeds and create more shadows this way. So the paper was damp, and now that I am dropping more pigment, it's spreading a little bit more. So when the paint on the paper is dry, it won't create bleeds like it does when you have a damp paper or a wet paper. So I am wetting this a little bit, dampening it, creating some shadows, and then dropping some pigment on that, and it will spread out a little bit and it will create these beautiful bleeds. And I'm just going to keep doing this process until I feel happy with the blend, and then I'm going to go on with the rest of the flowers. You see here, I'm going to wet the paper and then I'm going to drop in some pigment while it is still wet, so you will actually see how I create some more of a bleeding effect. So the paper is damp there and I'm outlining and dropping in some pigment right here. So you see how it spreads when it's a little bit dampened, as opposed to when the paper is just dry, it sort of has more of a pigmented look. So this is a nice way to create some shades and variation. And now I am going in with my yellow and I am just pulling out details and going over the final parts of the flower. And this we want to be pretty opaque, using a darker violet and really pulling out all those details now that we are done with the base of the flower. Outlining where they should be, these little center pieces of the stamen, and just pulling out any sort of details that have been covered or look a little too mixed in, and we want everything to stand out on its own. Same technique, I'm going to wait till everything is dried, which these have dried as we painted, and then I am going to go in with some little thin lines and pull out some details in the leaves, just so it doesn't look so flat and boring. There's always like a little center line, and then these leaves tend to have little tiny skinny lines. So this adds some more dimension and some shadow. I'm just gonna keep doing that until I am happy with how everything looks, blending it, adding more pulling, adding more water, creating more shadow. And now I'm going back over the pot and really pulling out more shadows in the lip of the pot. And really, once this is finished, I think we are done. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you liked it and I hope you learned something. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram for even more tutorials. And I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time.